Planning design research. Now, let's talk about how to plan design research, why it's important to meet people in their natural context, who to talk to, how to write a discussion guide, and an example from a real project. Typically, there are two kinds of projects that require two different kinds of research approaches: generative or formative research. Either we are looking for good ideas, or we have an idea and want to see if it's a good one. Let's talk about type number one. Let's assume it's a project for a medical company, and we are asked to come up with good ideas to improve the therapy of diabetes patients. In this case, it's our job to gather inspiration for new solutions, so we are creating choices. This broad kind of research is called generative. It's exploratory, often used in the beginning of projects. Then the other type number two. We're having good ideas and we are trying to get it right, to fix it. So let's say there is, again, a medical company and they ask us to test new types of insulin pens. And in this case, it's more about improving an already existing idea. So this research is called formative research. It's more about validating and filtering ideas, involving prototypes and storyboards. We might suggest little changes on the numbering scale or find out how to improve the packaging while patients are traveling. Let's talk about natural context, or why we want to see what's real and not ideal. The basics of design research are a good interview and a good observation. And that works best if you meet people in their natural context. We don't want to invite them to our facility or our meeting room. And as we are in their environment, mostly when it's about understanding their lives, their homes are a great starting place. Let's imagine, again, a medical project. That's when we want to start to spend time with them, for example, in the hospital environment. But there are also situations where it might be more important to meet them in transit. Let's assume you're working on a mobility project. That's where we want to meet them in their car, or where we want to follow them or drive together with them by train while they commute to work. We want to put ourselves in their shoes and want to understand what matters to them and how they make decisions. This helps us to see the world through their eyes. Who to talk to or how to gather inspiration quickly. Please, don't go out and ask your friends what they think about your idea. In fact, ask your enemy what they think about it. You want the worst case scenario to pressure test ideas, and bad news are good news while gathering feedback. I know it's hard for us because we fall in love with our ideas easily, but we must find people that are not afraid to give us criticism. We don't want the same profile over and over again. In fact, we are looking for extreme users. People who are very different from each other and allow us different perspectives on the same problem. When I was doing research on diabetes, again, we talked with somebody who was afraid of needles, somebody who had lots of experience in self-injection, and someone, for example, who lived in a shared apartment and stored the medication in a fridge that she shared with her roommates. How to write a discussion guide. How do you prepare for an interview? First of all, it is important to be well prepared. One of the steps is to come up with a discussion guide, and that's not a list of topics and questions that allow us to have a deeper exploration. It's not a questionnaire where we want to go through every single question step by step. That's not the goal. We want to come up with questions that are open and open up a story. Here's another project example from Lucy Richter. She's a former IDEO colleague and now working independently as a researcher in San Francisco.
So I'd like to give an example of a project where we looked at an injection device. And I can't talk about the details of the injection device, but that's also not the point. What I really would like to amplify is the importance of following up with why as well as tell me more. So this is a research technique that allows us to dig deeper and get beyond what we see at the surface. So in this particular example, I was interviewing a gentleman. He was probably in his late 70s, and he was living in San Francisco, but his family, his children, were in LA, so he would regularly take that drive to visit family in LA. And when we were in his home, we asked him a couple of questions about his experience with diabetes and what medications he was using. And he told us he was using a violent syringe to inject himself with insulin. He had type 2 diabetes. As we were talking about what he uses to inject himself, we asked him, well, can you show us? So he opens the fridge, and in the fridge he has the vials full of insulin, and on top of the fridge he had a little plastic bag with the syringes, just like the disposable syringes in there. But in the fridge there was also an insulin pen. Now this was really interesting to us because he hadn't talked about the insulin pen at all, and if we had not been in his home, there would have been no way for us to actually know that he also had an insulin pen. So we asked him, well, can you tell us when do you use the insulin pen and when do you use violent syringe? And he basically was like, well, I use the insulin pen when I'm traveling. Now, at this point, if we'd left it at, oh, he's using it while traveling, and made the assumptions that, oh, it's probably easier, he doesn't have to worry about refrigeration as much as with the insulin in the vial, we could have just left it at that. But one of the research techniques is to actually dig deeper and ask, well, can you tell us more? Like, how do you use the pen when you're traveling? So we asked him exactly this question, and he said, well, I'm in my car, and I'm driving down 101, which is a highway that connects San Francisco and LA. And when it's time for me to inject, I'll move from the left lane into the right lane, and into the furthest right lane, and I'll go a little slower, and then I'll take my blood sugar, and by that time we're getting the sense, okay, there's something unique going on, as he then continues that he actually takes the blood sugar as he's driving, and then uses the pen to dial the amount of insulin that he needs to self-inject, and then injects through his pants. So if we had not asked why and tell us more, we would have not uncovered this story.
And why was that important for you to know?
It informed us because one of the assumptions on the project was that there are people who are using violent syringe, and then there are other patients who are using pens, and we had little seen that some people actually use both, but for different contexts. So it informed us in the sense that it's not just about a type of user, but that the context of use matters, and that people actually might benefit from the flexibility rather than being put into one bucket and treated like that.
Again, just to summarize everything. The first thing is meet people in their natural context. Second is remember to recruit participants who are very different from each other and who are not afraid to criticize your concepts. And the last thing is always try to remember to ask open-ended questions.